Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum students. How are you? I'm your instructor Zia Hamid. I hope that you're doing well. Welcome to English Grade 6. We are on unit number 6. This is our lecture number 2. And today we are going to talk about adjectives, right? In the previous lesson, we talked about the identification of adjectives. And now we are going to talk about regular and irregular degrees of adjectives. We know that adjective is a part of speech and it has different degrees, degree of positive degree or assertive you can call it, comparative degree and superlative degree. But there's a catch. Yes, there are regular adjectives and irregular adjectives. Let's see about that and let's learn something new today. This is your students' learning outcome. Let's read it carefully and see how we can achieve it. So these are two SLOs, students. They are of the same nature. I put them together. Change and use degrees of regular and irregular adjectives. Yes, both regular and irregular adjectives have different degrees, but they are different. We are going to see them. And next, change and use the degrees of adjectives and into positive, comparative, or superlative, right? Okay, so these are two SLOs of art for today's video lesson. Here is your vertical linkage, and moving on to our usual brainstorming session, you have to fasten your seat belts, get ready for this interesting brainstorming session, and be very much attentive. Now, think of some words you use to describe things like fast, funny, or good. Now, we are describing them. They are our adjectives, right? Now, if we are comparing two things together and seeing which one is more fast or more funny or even more good, so how do we do it? How do we achieve this if we are comparing, let's say two cars? Now, we are going to tell which one is actually more fast, right? So how do you do it? You will use degrees, some degrees of comparison, some degrees of superlative. Because if there are 5 cars, students, and only one of them, just one is the fastest, just like I use this word. So how would you say that this one is the fastest among all 4 or 5? Yes, we are going to use different degrees for this purpose, and that's why we learn the degrees of adjectives. Now let's move on. So I hope that you are done with the brainstorming session. You have submitted your answers to the teacher and discussed with your fellows. Let's talk about regular and irregular adjectives. So if you remember, students, regular adjectives make their comparative and superlative forms or degrees either by adding the suffixes. Suffixes are words that we add at the end of the word. Either we add er or est, or we can also make it by adding words like more and most. For example, if we have an adjective, red, if something is red in color and we have two different things, they're both red, but one is redder than the other. So we are using comparative degree. We are comparing two things. So red will become redder. And if you want to use even more degree, you can use it superlative degree, and it will be reddest. So what did we do? We added er for comparative degree and est for superlative degree. And you can notice that when we are doing them, the extra d adds. So it happens sometimes that you have to double the word in order to add the er or est. Let's take another word, pretty. Now, if you want to compare two pretty things, you can say prettier. Just remove the y and add I, followed by er, and you're adding ier. It becomes prettier. or the superlative degree, the highest degree, prettiest, with removing y and adding iest. All right, is it clear? Beautiful become not beautifuler, it will become more beautiful, because we said that we can achieve the degrees of comparative and superlative of adjectives by adding more and most. So more beautiful, and the superlative, the highest degree, would be most beautiful. More is used for comparison, most is used for comparing with everything else, and it becomes a superlative degree. Now, these are our regular adjectives. Now, irregular adjectives do not make their comparative and superlative forms or degrees by adding the suffixes er, est, more, or most. It means now we are going to make the comparative and superlative degrees of adjectives without using er, est, or more and most. How do we do it? For example, the comparative and superlative forms of the word bad and good are if you are comparing some two things, bad, that they are bad, you will use the word worse, not better. And if you want to do the highest form out of all the other things to stand out, you will use the word worst, not worser or worsest. Good will become better in comparative and best in superlative. Now, these are completely different words than good. That's why we call them irregular. There is no regularity. They are irregular. All right. Now, what you're supposed to do, students, is very simple. You need to open your mind up, write down the comparative and superlative degrees of the following adjectives. Also, classify whether the adjective is regular or irregular. Yes, you're going to do two things over here. You have to write the comparative and superlative degrees of these adjectives, and also you have to classify them. You have to label them whether they are regular or irregular. We know that they are regular when they are having er or est at the end, and they are irregular if the comparative and superlative forms of that adjective is totally changed from the original adjective word. So you're going to do this really interesting fun activity right now by pausing the video, doing it, and submitting it to your instructor. All right. Okay, now here is another very interesting activity. You can do it for your homework as well if you want. You have to bring in a picture of one of your favorite places, perhaps a memorable vacation spot and all that. Take a piece of paper, write sentences describing the place. It means we are going to use adjectives, using as many adjectives as possible. So follow the rest of these instructions. Instead of just using it simply, you can just say there are four tall twisty trees with thick bushy green leaves in the shady garden. So many adjectives are used. Instead of just saying there is a tree in the garden, you can use so many adjectives to describe your noun. Now, here is a simulation link. As always, for your better understanding, you can watch it later. And now the worksheet is added over here. For your homework, what you're going to do is make superlative and comparative degrees of adjectives, use them in your sentences as well. You can read the instructions and attempt this homework. Here are your resources for better understanding that you can watch, and you can get this from the description of the video, students. Solve them, and then you are good to go. You will understand that how we can use the regular and irregular degrees of adjectives, of those adjectives that are either regular or irregular. I hope that we have achieved our students' learning outcome. Take care of yourselves. I'll meet you in the next video lesson. Allah Hafiz.